여러분은 지금 뮤콘 2021 컨퍼런스를 쭉 함께하고 계십니다. 지금까지 저희는 음악과 빅데이터 분석, 마케팅 등 여러 분야에 관한 이야기를 준비해 왔는데요. 이번에는 음악과 싱크의라는 주제를 가지고 여러분과 이야기를 더 나눠보고 싶습니다. 그러기 위해서 A&G Sync 키란 파텔 대표를 모시고서 강연을 들어본 뒤 질의응답 시간 이어가 보도록 하겠습니다.
Hello, my name's Kiran Patel. I head up the creative team at A&G Sync and Power-Haus Creative. First of all, I'd like to thank MUCON 2021 and KOCCA for inviting me to speak to you about all things sync. Hopefully next time we can all be in Seoul in person, and I look forward to future events. Okay, first of all, A&G is an international sync agency looking after artists from all around the world. So hopefully in the next few minutes I can give you an insight into what we've been up to in the past 18 months and impart some knowledge and experience of the international sync market, mainly in the UK and Europe, and of course the USA, which is the biggest market of them all. And of course, there's the Power-Haus creative side of the company, which specialises in neoclassical cinematic soundscapes and reworking classic tracks for use in promos and movie trailers. And then we'll move on to talk about the industry as a whole and how it's coped around COVID and beyond. And talk about the interactivity between agents such as myself and clients and tips on landing syncs. And lastly, I'd love to talk about the Southeast Asian diaspora's influence upon storytelling in Hollywood and the influence of culture as a whole. The purpose of this talk will hopefully give a small window into how A&G operate and the basic business practices in sync, as opposed to the intricacies of music publishing or copyright law. Whilst there's no fail-safe way of getting a placement, hopefully some background of from behind the scenes will help in landing that coveted spot. Okay, so my background was in music PR and production music. So I've built my network up, building relationships with talented composers, musicians and bands. And then that love of actually pairing them up with filmmakers, games developers and music supervisors. A&G's background was as a small label and production house, developing acts, bands and artists that soon developed a really healthy sync revenue. And that shift in the business moved to being an out-of-house sync department for independent labels such as Dirty Hit, who have signed Rina Sawayama, Wolf Alice, Bibi Doobie, No Rome, amongst a whole host of other really talented acts. In recent years, we've continued to develop and create music with a focus on sync and launch a trailer music label and custom music house called Power-Haus Creative. Recent examples of our work can be heard on trailers for Matt Damon's Stillwater, Reminiscence, starring Hugh Jackman, and 9 Perfect Strangers with Nicole Kidman. So they're specialist areas, but hopefully, no matter who's listening to this, might be able to get something out of it. Firstly, whether you're an up-and-coming artist or even have a considerable following, perhaps engaging with a sync agency could take you to that next level of your career. Secondly, perhaps you're wanting to get into the music licensing landscape and behind the scenes of the music business. And thirdly, music industry professionals trying to exploit copyright and generate revenue on behalf of those catalogues and artists that they represent. And fourthly, it could be useful for composers. That covers film scores, trailer music, production music, and bespoke. It's definitely important to understand the differing models when it comes to the sync industry and understanding people's roles within that ecosystem of sync. So you have the boutique representation models from agencies such as A&G, and you also have the more traditional models of music publishers and labels who have their in-house sync teams. But you also have the digital distributors now that have a non-exclusive component to representing your work for sync as well. And then there's, of course, the clients and how we interact with the music supervisors that are hired by brands, studios, directors, and showrunners. The landscape is constantly evolving, And with new companies launching all the time, we are all constantly learning about how to improve best business practices and how we can best position artists to land more opportunities and a more diverse offering for the musical talent in a highly competitive market. Okay, so let's move on to the state of the industry and how workflows potentially changed with COVID and lockdowns. Like most businesses during lockdown and the pandemic, the past 18 months has meant a period of adaptation and working from our kitchen tables, like I am now. Like many in the music industry, we have been adaptable, and that's been the key to our survival. But there's no escaping that it's the same environment as before. It's incredibly competitive. We are always prepared for setbacks, but continue to prepare music and present in the best way possible to increase opportunities. Okay, this is all very well, but how do I land a sync? The perennial question. Okay, that's one that I can answer very easily. Create great music. Okay, that's a very easy cop-out there. But once you have an incredible track, you also need to build everything around it. The assets. Make sure you have the appropriate assets around this incredible piece of work to get it used and licensed in a production. We're talking metadata, we're talking lyric sheets, we're talking about approval from potential co-writers so that someone can license your work 100%. If these co-writers are outside your control, make sure that you have the updated contact information and agreements in place of those exact splits. Landing syncs is a creative and collaborative process. So once you have these appropriate assets in line, you will incrementally gain the support and trust of the gatekeepers and the music supervisors that will eventually use your music. If you do this well, it can lead not only to landing placements, but also connectivity to new audiences and possible future playlisting on DSPs such as Spotify. When you land something, the planets have aligned. So make the most of it, promote it as best you can, and create a buzz. This is an important milestone for engaging with the media landscape. You're gaining revenue from your creative work, and if it connects with an audience, that's an added bonus. It's a launch pad rather than the final destination. Breaking an artist via sync is very rare, but it can happen. Just remember that not every placement means outside engagement from fans, so there's no need to be discouraged from a placement passing by. This is still a great achievement and one that could be built upon and remarketed within the sync industry. There is so much TV out there. In the USA, over 500 plus scripted reality TV shows were made in 2019. And that does not even include unscripted shows like game shows, talk shows, or reality television. It's a giant playground, and there's room for every type of music. Find the uses in specialist areas, storytellers and filmmakers that you identify with. Understand your strengths, where your music sits creatively and visually. Know that you are competing with big catalogues, vintage and well-known popular copyrights that will of course gain the biggest market share. But there's room for everybody, and new platforms are emerging all the time. The pandemic has been a hard time, but a productive time for some, and perhaps we are heading towards a roaring 20s style artistic boom. And hopefully more syncs will follow. A&G and Power-Haus had plenty of trailers pushed back, or lost completely as theatres and cinemas were closed. Now these productions that were once postponed are back online, and people are making up for lost time and lost revenue. It's a great time to be pitching relevant tracks and creating and releasing music for these opportunities. During COVID, there's been more eyeballs on TV, more people at home, and more Shazams and syncs sitting at the forefront of the action, with some lucky artists gaining more and more followers along the way. Predictably, production slowed and scripted drama switched to reality shows that rushed to fill the gap. It's helpful to understand here quite how many cues are licensed by music supervisors on those shows. It's a vast amount of work in clearance and admin alone. This is why when pitching, all your music needs to be watertight, and you need to understand and be sympathetic to who's receiving that. Okay, so if you're choosing to go alone without a label or a sync agency such as A&G, you've really got to know what projects music supervisors are working on. Do your research. You want to be targeted and don't want to waste time pitching your music to when it's not relevant. Ask yourself if what you're doing musically is tonally right for sync and this type of use. Is there production value there? Be wary of overselling your own creativity. It can often be the kiss of death, saying that you can do everything. Every style and every genre. Versatility, of course, is important, but try and specialise and target to your strengths. Hone your skills before you approach sync professionals. It's worth remembering that in this game, it's all subjective. Find your fans and believe in what you do. Hone your craft and you will find like-minded creatives. When pitching for sync, it's worth remembering that there's an incredibly low hit rate. Even if you're a successful recording artist with millions of streams, sometimes it works for the scene and sometimes it doesn't. As an artist, it's important not to be led or discouraged by the industry noise. Be yourself, and your agents can do the legwork and be your cheerleader by pitching your material. After all these years working in sync, I still don't know what syncable is, and I wouldn't attempt to write thinking sync. Whether an artist or composer, authenticity is key. What is meaningful to you and connects emotionally with you will almost certainly be the same connection for a filmmaker and a director that feels the same, that the commonality of experience could match perfectly with any given scene and help communicate their story. Once that first sync is in the bag, there's no guarantee that lightning will strike twice. An over-reliance on that income is probably not the best business model. Landing spots is not always consistent, and it's advised that you have a healthy revenue stream from varied sources. It's also worth bearing in mind, and I must stress, that syncs aren't the key to your music career. Your music career is the key to syncs. Okay, now let's move on to a bit more in-depth exploration of how you can approach sync professionals and how different business models can benefit you. Okay, first of all, try to talk the language of licensing. Do your research. What rights do you own and clear? Is it master only, publishing only, one stop? Try and use platforms like Disco, which is the industry standard for content management. All the gatekeepers use it in their working life, and it's fantastic. It's a great way to deliver content quickly and avoids multiple uploads and downloads, and it shows that you understand and communicate in the language of sync. Remember, it's a buyer's market and incredibly competitive, so anything that can incrementally increase the odds of landing is worth noting, even down to naming your folders with your company name or artist name and tagging with correct contact details. Again, research. Understand the wider structure and ecosystem of sync. Who are you pitching to? What's the onward chain of creative? There tends to be little appreciation or interest in the symbiosis between the music creation, those that peddle the music, and the procurement of sync deals and the music supervisors at the end of the chain. Keep asking, who is on your side and has your best interests at heart? And understand and build trust in the people you are pitching to. It can be invaluable to partner up with a sync agency or publisher that believes in your project and believes that they can push it forward. Music supervisors receive an unimaginable amount of music each day from every angle, from every platform. It's a time-poor client base and needs trusted sources. Quick on tight to clear tracks on quick and tight deadlines. Your music and associated assets need to be cleared, licensed in full, and without any issue whatsoever. At all costs, you must avoid any hint of suspicion that you cannot clear what you've presented to music creators. It must be 100% legitimately clearable. There's most certainly space in the international sync market for independent and up-and-coming artists, as long as the copyright is in order, avoiding multiple writers with different major publishers, and definitely no uncleared samples. Here at A&G, we're often vetting catalogues and priming them for licensability before we even attempt to put them in front of a client. There's often a misunderstanding that you need to be published or have a big company behind you to land these spots. There are other ways, including engaging with an independent sync agency. Before you engage with these sync agencies, it's important to get your own house in order. And first impressions are everything. Speak the accepted language of sync and be clear with what rights you control. Cherish helping hands along the way. Find people that can elevate and push your music to the right people. Agencies come in different forms and their rates may differ, their terms may differ, but most notably they could be exclusive or non-exclusive. Non-exclusive is often seen as attractive from an artist or a management point of view. Right, if you have more people hustling for spots, then therefore you will land more. Experience tells us that there could be a too many cooks scenario. Double pitching can actually confuse the end client. And by having one team that has your back, there's a clear line of communication that actually can help get you over the line to land a spot. A&G are an exclusive agency. We structured it this way based upon expectations from our client base and the fact that our revenue is commission-based without any monthly retainers like radio pluggers or publicists. We need to be invested and incentivized in a project to push it forward. If the team on the ground feel connected to the project, you will often get the most out of their enthusiasm and their connections. A&G's agreements are often a year, 12 months as a bare minimum to build awareness and to connect with our client base. Even then, there are no guarantees. So choose a sync agency as you would a manager, booking agent or publicist. Someone who is truly passionate about your music and wants to be part of your journey as an artist. Okay, now finally I wanted to talk a bit about the Southeast Asian diaspora and their influence upon film and music in the modern day. It's something I personally find incredibly fascinating. I come from a mixed heritage family of Indian immigrants that moved to the UK in the 70s. Over the past 4 or 5 years, we are seeing a cultural shift in modern media. Discussions around representation are at the fore, and there have been watershed moments in cinema where the Southeast Asian influence is undeniable. Growing up, you would see a very narrow cross-section of society on Western screens, but that's now changing. Video-on-demand platforms such as Netflix, Amazon, Hulu, Disney Plus, and innovative studios like A24 are driving and changing the landscape. The influence of storytellers from Southeast Asian diaspora is undeniable. The interest and revenue generated by movies by Korean filmmakers or of those of Asian American backgrounds brings in vast global audiences and has to influence studio bosses and make them stand up and take notice. And now, Parasite winning Academy Awards, and this year Lee Isaac Chung's Minari nominated for 6 Oscar nominations, surely is an indicator of a cultural shift. A global spotlight on the rich cinematic culture of a nation. Stephen Yeun is the first Asian American actor to be nominated. There are vastly different stories to tell, and filmmakers are no longer talking down and reimagining how the silver screen represents gender and race. At A&G, we've been lucky enough to be a small part of those stories, placing artists in Netflix series such as To All the Boys, written by Korean author Jenny Han. As creators, you may be aware of how any given audience wants to frame your work, especially online. But remembering the human experience and the universality of music is key. There's a hunger for more diverse stories, and there's a definite move away from myopic cliché or stereotype in popular culture. People's eyes and ears are open, and it needs a good soundtrack to help elevate those voices. On the music side of things, you have mainstream or Western culture leaning towards the incredible commercial success of K-pop, BTS or Blackpink, that lays the path and inspires the next generation, and they are referenced in Sync loads. These diverse and differing stories demand authenticity, and with Sync, it's a musical meeting point for these stories on screen, and where meaningful cultural transference can occur. Okay, so how to wrap things up? Sync is a tough old game. It can take time, even if you've been in the business for a long time. So be strategic in your partnerships and be patient. I would say the state of the industry is looking healthy, and there's an air of cautious optimism post-COVID. There are more companies than ever vying for attention and getting on the radar of the decision makers. It's a gradual process, but there's always an exception to the rule. Good music always rises to the top and finds a home somewhere, so there's a reason to be optimistic. Thank you for listening to me rabbit on about Sync. I really appreciate your time. Please visit angsyncmusic.com to see what we've been up to in more detail, and check out our show reel. I hope to be in MUCON in person in the future. Thank you very much.
야, 싱크라는 개념을 통해서 어떤 일들이 벌어질 수 있는지, 아티스트가 어떻게 활용할 수 있는지 정말 재미난 이야기를 많이 들려주셨는데요. 저희가 강의만 듣고 끝나면 뮤콘이 아니겠죠. A&G Sync의 키란 파텔 대표 모시고 직접 이야기 나눠보도록 하겠습니다. Hi, Mr. Patel. It's great to see you. Thank you for your awesome lecture. Before we get started, can I ask you to say hello to the people who are watching the MUCON right now?
Hi everyone. Hi, Kiran here. I run a sync agency in London called A&G Sync.
Great. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. I love your lecture and it was really inspiring. I learned a lot about what we can do smartly with using sync, the concept of sync. But personally, and honestly, it's my first time hearing the term sync as a term. So
Okay.
I'm wondering, there are a few people who are watching this but still confused about the concept of the sync. So can you briefly tell what the term sync means and what sync music is?
Absolutely. Well, any music can be sync music, and the word sync is really synchronization licensing. So it's about licensing music to any moving image. So we could be talking about a TV show, we could be talking about a commercial, we could be talking about a trailer. So it's about licensing a copyright for any moving image. So that's what sync is shorthand for. Sync music, there are different forms that it takes. You know, you have artists and commercial artists that we know and listen to on any given platform. You can license their music to any moving image. And there are also people writing very specifically for commercials or trailers, and composers doing score for big movies. So it's a broad range, but that's the basics. You need to license the master recording and the publishing, the songwriting side, to any moving image, and that's what you can call the sync industry.
Okay, thank you for the clear description of the concept. You talked about finding talented musicians for the companies. What are the tips of A&G Sync when it comes to finding talented musicians in this competitive market? Does your sense for successful music come from your instinct based on your extensive experience, or deep analysis on the trends?
Interesting question. I think first and foremost, we have connections with independent labels, publishers, management companies. So we rely on our network of recommendations of those on the ground developing artists. So we often can connect with them and get great recommendations from there. But like any A&R process, we consume music like anyone, through playlists or through going to shows, or an awful lot of our roster sometimes comes from an anonymous, a cold reach out to us. They'll send us a few tracks, some streaming links to the team here, and if we like what we hear, we'll have a discussion with them and see whether we can represent them and try and land them some sync placements.
Wow. So it's really, really vast open window for every artist then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say some genres work better than others, but it depends on the medium. Sometimes, commercials, they need to, be upbeat and have a singular message and put that message across in 30 seconds. Whereas, TV shows maybe not so much, and there's a broad range of different lyrics and genres that can be used. It depends on where they're shooting, where the movie is set, and all these different other factors, creative factors that come into it. I would say there's a broad opportunity for every level of artist in whatever stage of their career. If it's brilliant production, then and great quality music, then there is always going to be a potential to find it on screen.
Great. And during your lecture, you give quite many emphasis on the things that the artists have to look for when they're looking for the opportunities using Sync. One of the advices you gave to the artist was to create great music first and foremost. However, music itself is quite subjective for everyone. So how can an artist build their confidence in their personal brand of greatness?
Yes, that's a very generic term to say create great music. But what I mean by that is the nuts and bolts, the construction of the music. If you're paying attention to the mix, you know, the quality instrumentation and the mastering, and not cutting any corners on that front, on the production quality front, then you're already increasing the probability of getting these placements. So when I say incredible music, yes, it's very personal. It's very subjective, of course. What one person thinks is fantastic might not be what someone else thinks is fantastic. But I think what I mean by that is just think about whatever genre, whatever you're into, whatever you're creating, make sure it's the best possible production, and then you've got a really good opportunity there to get it placed on any moving image. So, and why I say this is you just got to imagine being at a movie theater and thinking about all the other things that are going on screen and incredible 4K HD quality. The audio has to be of that nature too.
Sure.
So yeah, and now it's becoming easier than ever to create fantastic high fidelity soundscapes. So I think that's one thing to take away from that is the production quality. Yeah.
Okay, production quality. Yeah, the term I have to keep in mind, and every artist have to keep in mind the production quality. But let's say there's an artist, and let's say he has found the right storyteller for him and the right filmmaker for work with him. Could you recommend the best way for that artist? But let's assume he's really unknown. No one knows about him. Could you recommend the best way for an unknown individual to show their capabilities in this field?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I think timing is really important. So if you found someone that you think is perfect, you've got to remember that some people, if you're talking about filmmakers especially, you've got to be sympathetic to their own schedule. So when you may feel as if like, this is the time where I can connect with this filmmaker and they're going to think that my music's brilliant. Well, you've got to be sympathetic to the fact that they might not be looking for music right there and then, but a really simple tip would just be, a handful, 4 or 5 of your top pieces of work. And, if you're unknown and you haven't got showreel material yet or credits in this world, then just send the music, describe a little bit about you, keep it very short. Don't overwhelm the recipient. I think that's really important. Make it, choose your timing. Make sure that you've done as much research as possible. Are they in pre-production, post-production? Where have you heard about them, and why do you think that your music may be a good fit? Mm-hmm. And just be polite and patient. And maybe you follow up, in a few weeks' time after you've given them some time to receive it or listen to it. It's really important just to understand that an awful lot of my clients that I'm approaching and I'm pitching to, I understand that their time is very restricted. So it's a patience exercise in patience often.
Wow.
But making sure that you're there and that you keep on producing. So you shouldn't be discouraged by no one responding. If you just create and you continue to share your creations with filmmakers, etc., then I think that's a good way to go. And be persistent but polite. I think it's a good approach.
Wow. Well, honestly, I'm not an artist myself, but hearing that, I kind of have building my respect for every artist who are living in this world because listening to you, an artist have to think about being polite, about the timing, making the best production ever. Everything have to be in their consideration. So yeah, that just build the respect for them.
Absolutely, it's resilience. It's hard and very competitive, but I would also say I would loop it back to the fact that, you know, if you are an artist and you are creative, it's good to team up with other people. This is why I'm here. I'm an agent. You know, I work on behalf of these artists, pitching their work and helping them. You know, that could be on the creative front and building tracks, but also I'm their champion. You know, I'm their agent that I can make those emails and I can take that burden for them so they can be busy creating and I can be the one trying to land them these deals.
Wow, okay. You just mentioned the concept of teamwork, not working as an individual. Since you're in the music industry, let's talk about a music industry as a whole. Since I live in Korea, I look for the news that are related to K-pop and K-pop singers. What do you think are some reasons for BTS and Blackpink to have a successful career in global market? Have you got any opinion on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think first of all, I think I think it goes back to incredible. It goes back to the core of it. It's great. It's brilliant songwriting. It's incredibly catchy hooks. It's incredible beats that you know, incredibly danceable. And I think also it coincides perhaps with the advent of and the popularity of hip hop as well. You know, there's a lot of influences coming in: funk, soul, hip hop, and you put that all together, and I think you have also a younger audience now. You know, the advent of the internet.
What do you think will be the biggest change that will occur due to the pandemic?
Well, production, the way in which people are filming and shooting, you know, this doesn't just apply for TV shows or movies or anything. You know, this is music videos, this is commercials and anything. You know, people have been very resilient in the measures in which they're taking to keep everyone safe. And now we're almost 2 years into to kind of people creating. And I think where the cautious optimism comes from is that, you know, last year we were involved in an awful lot of trailers for big movies that got pushed back because there were no cinemas, there were no movie theaters open. Whereas now we've got this amazing straight to streaming economy going on. So people, the real life experience of being in the movie theaters, just like live shows and concerts, people want that experience. But also, you know, you could get the streaming to your devices, to your TV. And I think now that you know, things are ramping up, people are creating more, it means that there's a knock-on effect and there will be more music to be licensed for all these productions. So yeah, it's looking you know, optimistic on the production front, and this is all helpful for the income that's generated through licensing music to those productions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patel. I think that's all the time we have for this Q&A session. Thank you for your precious time. And I'll give you my word. If I ever write a song, if I ever write a music and want it to be on a moving image, I will contact your company. Thank you for your time today.
Look forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Would you like to say goodbye to the people who are watching this Mukon right now?
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. And hopefully next time we can do it in person in Seoul.
We do hope that too. Thank you very much, Mr. Patel. We'll see you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
비대면으로 하는데도 이렇게 텐션이 좋으시니까 뮤콘과 키란 파텔 대표님 싱크가 잘 맞지 않나라는 생각을 좀 했습니다. 다시 한번 대표님께 감사하다는 말씀 전해드리고 싶어요. 뮤콘 2021 컨퍼런스 1부 어떠셨나요? 참 다양한 의미에서 전 세계가 많은 변화를 맞이하고 있는데요. 음악의 세계에도 예외는 아닙니다. 오늘의 강연이 음악의 최신 트렌드를 분석하고 내일을 준비하는 우리에게 많은 영향을 미치리라고 기대하고 있습니다. 1부는 여기서 마무리하도록 하고요. 저희는 2부에서 인사드리도록 하겠습니다. 오늘도 음악 같은 하루 보내세요. 감사합니다.